What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Thursday show, gang. A little breakdown of a 6-game NBA slate. Apologies for the late start. Sorry to keep you guys waiting, but I dropped a note into chat. Hopefully you caught it. Was rerunning The Sims there. My mistake scheduling a show for 4:45, thinking I'd get away with it. That's of course, 4:30 is the 1:30 West Coast news break, and we got some critical news for Philly. Joel Embiid is questionable, which was expected, and then we got both of Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond are out. So I just made those changes and reran the Sims. Just waiting on FanDuel to finish up. We're through 3 of the 5 Sims that we're running, and we'll be all good there in a sec. But we do have DraftKings loaded up already, so let me pull the board up there. But hopefully you guys are doing well out there. Should be a solid slate tonight. Hopefully no crazy post-lock scratches, post-lock nonsense like we had last night. How about the NBA just getting 2025 off on a familiar foot? Just saying like, you thought things might be different. You thought you might have a fun, easy start to the year. Nope. Deuce McBride, gonna start, not gonna play within 5 minutes of one another. But after lock. That was beautiful. He landed in, half of all lineups across both sites, including most of mine. That was problematic. Still put a few into the money, at least. We're obviously looking for the top of the board, not just into the money. But on a day like that, where you get some zeros implanted into basically every lineup, it's nice to be able to claw back a little bit at least. Everything else went kind of to plan, as far as my lineups anyway. So that one hurt a little bit. But we move on. Everything else, Knicks. I mentioned it. I tried to stress it in chat before that Knicks game locked. As soon as Brunson went out, not only does it make Deuce McBride interesting in that situation, and the backup by extension campaign and Landry Shamet behind him in those situations, but most specifically, Karl Anthony Towns and Josh Hart go to the moon in their per minute rates, and they did it again last night. They both go way, way up in that situation. So I was all over those guys. I projected them way up. It was just unfortunate that Deuce decided not to be able to play. How about Tyler Kolek in that game, though? 2 games in one day? Talk about rare. He's going to get a call from the Players Association. And tell him, hey, man, we're worried about this effort that you're showing out there. Make everybody else look bad with these play every couple of scheduled games. Yeah, rough night, Den. Yeah. Yep. I know it. It's everybody got nailed by it. If you put it this way, if you were on the side of it where you didn't get nailed, you're talking about the handful of lineups where you didn't get to Deuce in a big portfolio, or you're honestly talking about lineups that at lock were not properly constructed. He was the critical play at that point. When that slate locked, when that game locked, he was the critical play of the day. So having him was the right move, regardless. You can't worry about result. Results-based thinking is not the way to go. And I know you guys know that with a play like that. Yeah, Giddey came up light. We talked about Giddey and how overprojected he was in some places. We were still high on him. The spot still looked strong. That game environment was great. But yeah, he was another guy who underperformed. But I was happy that at least I was lighter than I think where some other places were. But yeah, I had a fair amount of Giddey in some of the lineups. The ones that didn't get there with Deuce in them were the ones that also had Giddey. Let me see if this FanDuel slate is done. Yes, it is. So same slate across both sites tonight, which is good. But we do have games going into the late night. This goes here. And we should be good. All right. So, the change before from the original set of projections that I was making that happened during the late afternoon before the Philly change was that Anthony Davis went to doubtful and got removed from projections. Doesn't seem like he's going to play. So we've got a ton of Lakers at the top of the board. We already had Trace Jackson Davis kind of dominating up toward the top of the board from Golden State because he's just kind of cheap and playing minutes. Danny Avdija with the presumption of a 30-plus minute night again at a fair price from the mid-range is dominating a ton of shares and already was. So we've just had like this group of Lakers floated up to the top and joined an already chalky TJD and Denny up there. And then now it looks like we've got Paul George floating up to pretty fair amount of shares on both sites. We've got Joel Embiid not far behind on DraftKings, but not at all on FanDuel. 10-5 versus 9,400 explains that. So it's a really concentrated group of ownership up at the top of the board on DK around that group of players. But we've got very specific guys that everybody's going to be on top of, and it's good chalk. I mean, there are good reasons that all of this is coming up strong. So it's going to be a fun one to talk through. Let's talk game environment real quick. Say hi to everybody as we get started, too. I already said hi to Dennis. Anthony Taylor's here. Michael Knack is here. Cujo's here. Hope you're having a good day, too, buddy. Anthony Taylor said, what's up, everybody? Hope everybody's recovered from the holidays, and now let's get back to winning some money. I like that idea. Doing a Martina McBride and LL Coulibaly last night. Sounded like shit. Tiz. Profited with 100% deuce. Nice job, Tiz. Doug's here. What's up, Doug? Cam was only a DVP accident, nothing more or less. Not sure where you're... Something in my eye. Yeah, Doug, I hate the that mid-range for that team. So, yeah, 0 to 30 minutes. Don't trust it. I completely agree. That's why I kind of like that it's just kind of the top-end guys that we're getting here for the most part. I mean, Max Christie's obviously way up there. But Christie at least played 28-4 in the last one. So there's some faith there. And then, like, LeBron is obvious in this situation. So it's not that crazy up the very top. And like Rui's only down here, 10% on both sides I'm fine with. DFS, 14 on FanDuel, but 2% on DraftKings, not coming up as a monster piece. And a lot of those guys are just, kind of mid-type per minute performers anyway. Don't connect with a few minutes on, couple shares on both sites. But yeah, it could go any number of different ways, especially again with, like we talked about the last time we talked about the Lakers with some new pieces in town, some old pieces shipped out of town. And then obviously with no AD, it's going to be pretty, and no Gabe Vincent today as well. So, pretty significant impact to what's been going on through the season versus what might be happening there tonight. And it's coming up in the sim. I mean, it's very clear that that's a critical part of it. But I mean, just look at this. One big chunk of guys that's either with the field or above the field. That's across all positions. That's 407% ownership across those guys. There's two centers in there, but you can play them together. You can get to most of that together in just chunks. But you're going to be rotating through a lot of those guys if you're following these numbers. And, I mean, look at the value scores. Basically everybody in range of 5.5 or above it. Very strong. But you've got some other options down here, too, that didn't come up quite as much. So there are available pivots where we're coming up lighter than the field, but there could be positions to be built as we go through it there. Cam has historically torched Utah. So there's very limited samples for which I would say any of that matters, Mamba, as far as like what somebody's done historically against the team. And it's really only in what's happened this season, because the teams last year are different than the teams this year. The teams, how far back you want to extend those things. If you're going back like, over 5 years or 3 years or whatever, he's averaged 32 points a game against Utah. I'm making these numbers up. That could be against a completely different group of guys. Right? So it's not really a good measure to go by what somebody's done historically against the team, unless we're talking about like, they've played 3 times this season already, and in this direct matchup, in this kind of a game environment, in games with comparable point spreads where everybody who's healthy in this game is healthy in that game. then you can start maybe making some comparisons like that. But there's so many variables that go into it. Otherwise, you're just saying essentially that he gets fired up to play against that color jersey, right? Or he doesn't like that city, so he gets fired up to play. And then, it's not really anything there. I get what you're saying, and anytime you can find data points, it's always nice to have supporting evidence, but you don't want to get confirmation bias injected into things. So just something to consider there. It depends on the extended amount of time that you're talking about as far as a sample size with something like that. What's up, CM311? Good to see you. Any point guard, we get points and assists against the Jazz. Doesn't matter who played. They're terrible in the pick and roll. Hence, Josh Hart with 13 assists. Yeah, look, they're just a flat-out terrible team, right? Everybody gets boosted against them. So it's no surprise. You're not wrong. Everybody's bad or everybody's good against them because they are bad. So let's talk game environments. Celtics, T-Wolves, good game. Celtics favored by 5 on the road in Minnesota. 217.5 point total there. Both Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis are questionable, though. Big impacts there. Might get both out, and then we would have just a monster Jason Tatum and those downstream pieces from Boston, most of which are still very solid mid-range players like White and like Peyton Pritchard and dudes like that, Drew. So plenty to work with from the Boston side. Minnesota kind of looking like an are who they are kind of a spot in a low totaled game. Maybe we don't get to as much Minnesota as we might want, but there'll definitely be some playable pieces there. Indy and Miami, just a 1.5 point game. Kind of interesting. 225.5 point total is not bad. It's actually our highest of the day, which is kind of surprising. It's a light day as far as points go. 225.5 at the top. We've got 2 more in the mid-teens, and then a 224.5 to end the night. So not the biggest Vegas day as far as robust totals to chase. But Indy and Miami, 225.5 and a close point spread. Definitely some mining of guys in their usual roles, I would say. And we've got some upside players in that game. Brooklyn and Milwaukee. This is a ugly point spread. Milwaukee favored by 13.5 because, of course, 221 point total there. Giannis was looking like a bigger piece earlier in the day, and then things kind of changed around him, but you can always get to a ton of Giannis. On the Brooklyn side, we'll see what some of that value looks like. I'm sure we're going to get to a fair amount of it. Just cheating and looking at the board real quick. I see D'Lo there again. Looks like limited on FanDuel again, but exposed on DraftKings again because he's still only 52. More of the Minnesota guys are actually coming up in the middle here than I would have expected, and then not that many Brooklyn guys. Day'Ron down here. Day'Ron could change radically on this slate. Right now I've got him at 18 minutes and a limited impact. I think he's been projected more highly in other spots, but no, Clowney is currently questionable, and if he doesn't go, I think there's an immediate benefit to Sharp. And Sharp already could get beyond what we've got him projected for here. So definitely one to watch. We're getting him 6% of the time for 3,500 on DraftKings. That's a little bit below the field. And we'll talk about it again later on. But one to watch out of Brooklyn there. But yeah, they're not coming up like crazy outside of D'Lo on DraftKings and a little bit of Day'Ron that could turn into more Day'Ron. It'll be interesting to see if his situation changes, what the impact there is against like the Lakers guys that changed, the Philly guys that changed, and so forth. Clippers and the Thunder, another big point spread here. Thunder favored by 11 at home against the Clips. 215.5. Harden is questionable for this one. Definitely one to watch there. Sixers and the Warriors. The aforementioned changes for the Sixers, but we do still have Joel Embiid in right now, currently questionable. We'll see what happens. 3.5 points. Warriors are favored by 3.5 at home. Just a 215.5 point total. That could get into a grindy, ugly kind of a game. But I think we're definitely going to see some parts of that one. And then Portland against LA. We're getting pieces of both sides of this one because we've got continued absences on the Portland side. We've got the AD out in the Lakers side of things. So ton of this game at the end of the night. Enjoy. Lakers favored by 7.5 at home. Still 224.5 point total in that one. Insies and outsies. Let me see just real quick. Out of morbid curiosity, I'm sure something changed just because it's that kind of slate right now. It's all Friday news. All right, good. So far it's The most recent thing is Philly. I really wish they would create like a underdog_tomorrow account or something so they wouldn't have to put the Friday news in with the Thursday news. It gets so annoying. All right, so the updates that came out during the day, I already mentioned them all, but once again, AD got downgraded to doubtful and removed. Doesn't seem like he's going to play. Embiid is questionable. That came out just because it was a late injury report on a back-to-back. So Embiid's questionable. Drummond and Oubre are both out. They've been removed in this current update and the one that's up on the site. By the way, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel before. Check out rotoscouts.com for all the projections. We've got a gigantic NHL slate. What was it, 12-game NHL slate? Like 460 some odd players I had to go through. There's one dude whose name is like JYKJ or something like that. He's got an absurd name that doesn't have any vowels in it unless you're counting Y's. There's a lot of fun names in hockey. A couple of them on Montreal. One guy is like XHEJ, and then I think it's like a number sign, question mark. A lot of fun names in hockey. I really enjoy hockey. I wish I could do hockey shows. I mean, I don't even have time where we're getting NFL shows in these days. But I wish I could do a hockey show. I think it would be a fun space to play in. But anyway. Probables, Nikola Jovic. He's available. Dunk Robinson is available. Giannis is probable. Chris Middleton and Draymond Green are all probable. Questionables, Joel Embiid, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Noah Clowney, AJ Green, James Harden, Kyle Anderson, Steph Curry. Some big names on the questionable list. Out, Kelly Oubre, Andre Drummond, Rob Dillingham, Luka Garza, Isaiah Jackson, Aaron Nesmith, James Wiseman, Josh Richardson, Drew Smith, Bojan Bogdanovic, Max Lewis, DeAnthony Melton, Ben Simmons, Trendon Watford, Kawhi Leonard, Terrence Mann, PJ Tucker, Alex Caruso, Chet Holmgren, Gary Payton, Brandon Podziemski, Jeremy Grant, Matty Thybulle, Anthony Davis, 80, is doubtful. Jalen Hood Schifino, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent is doubtful, and Christian Wood continues to be out. The Sixers stink, a bunch of idiots running that organization. I think a lot of my Sixers fan friends would agree with that, Mamba. Male Nurses Rock, I've missed you as well. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. I'm here. Missed you, over the break. Missed all you guys over the slight winter break that we had. So let's dive into this one. We got a bunch of people here after a couple days of lightly attended shows over the holidays and over the New Year. No expectations, of course. Let's hit this. Look how quickly the DraftKings thins out. It's going to be a wild one. So, position by position, starting with the guards, as usual. Going to be some differentiated plays across sites. We can already see some of them popping up. Tyler Hero's looking different across sites. Big difference on James Harden, assuming he plays. Looks like a piece on FanDuel. Big difference in price. But coming out of the Lakers, Max Christie up at the top of the board in 30 minutes for 4,700 at shooting guard only, pulling a 5+ value score, the biggest value score of the day at the guard spot on FanDuel. Also the biggest value spot of the day on DraftKings at 6.56. We're a full point above the 5.5 that we're looking for there. Got him 74% of the time in lineups. It's well ahead of the field. He's just a value square. He's a low-end per minute guy. I can get behind the idea of getting a little bit less than that kind of exposure while staying ahead of the field on him, but he just looks like a building block. You could take him down by about 2 fantasy points and adjust him more toward a rate that would be like his, along the lines of his standard. I've got his rate goosed a little bit because he's put up decent numbers in this situation. Did I close Wowie? I did. Same deal with Reeves. Reeves, more security of minutes. He played 38 minutes in their last game, put up nearly a 60 on the FanDuel scale. He's a 0.96 per minute player on FanDuel, a 1.01 per minute player on DraftKings. I think there's a lot less concern about getting to big shares of Austin Reeves. He's kind of proven that he can do it. But let me go back to You know what? I have to lower Christie. He's still a piece. I mean, he's projected in the 30s as far as ownership goes. So we do want to be well ahead on Christie, but I've got him a little bit higher than I should have. That's probably more appropriate. I was saying we could take 2 off. It was probably 3. I think I jumped up a line and read Jackson Hayes' number when I put this in. I'm a little bit lower. So that's going to come down slightly. But again, it's not going to matter. It's going to take him from, call it's 26.9, call it 23.5. You're still talking about a 5.73 value, which is going to be higher than all of those guys anyway. It just brings him back toward the field a little bit more. So you'd probably be 55, 65, somewhere in that territory, against 35-ish and one of the top owned plays of the day. But that is a little bit high. I'm bringing that one down in the next update for sure. Oops. Doug saying Reeves will get 50-plus fantasy points tonight. I have no doubt. Mama's calling for the triple-double line. All right, so again, just keep an eye on that. It'll come down over here too. 90's a little high, 75's a little high. This is why I like doing these shows, because I catch things like that. Again, Reeves definitely going to be a little bit more secure. He also goes up. He goes up significantly in this situation. So we've got a pretty beefy projection on him. Totally justified. That one I'm totally comfortable with. And I think you just get to a ton of shares of Austin Reeves. Following that, Paul George looking strong. 7,300 is not a bad price. 7,000 is not a bad price for a guy providing 1.08 on FanDuel, 1.09 per minute on DraftKings. Especially if we turn out to not get Embiid out there again. There's just opportunity for a few more shots. A little bit more creation. Put up a 45-1 in 36 minutes the other day. Has that upside. That's slightly above the current season rates, more like the 113 that he had last year. It's just a fair price for a still pretty strong player who is going to have more to do with already the situation that we're dealing with and could cascade down or upward, cascade downward around him and thrust him upward. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. D'Lo, just 2% because he's 6,400. Same situation as yesterday. We did not get him in the starting lineup yesterday, but he did end up having a good game. Did play a solid chunk of minutes, but didn't get to the 30 we're looking for. I think it's reasonable, given the missing pieces for Brooklyn, to expect a few more minutes here. You could see him go just like 26 again. I still think we're fine, even if that's the case on DraftKings. 5,200 over there, eligibility at both guard spots. It just looks as good as it did yesterday, even whether or not it pays off. 24% exposed. We are a little bit below the field there. It's a 5.6 value score. This probably goes up a little bit as this comes down a little bit. I would expect that probably ends up a little bit more like level with the field. I'll give you one better. Do that. Rerun that. I'm going to rerun these again in the background. We'll continue talking about this because it'll be, a less than crazy change. But I think that's important enough given how exposed he was with Christie up at the top. Where does FanDuel come to? Wait a minute, what the hell? Hang on one second. Yeah, all right. Weird. $23, and we'll rerun. All right, I'm rerunning those in the background. The reason I said weird is because I guess I changed it and then not realized in the background because it already had a 23 in there for him on one of them. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, it's just rerunning for Christie in the background just to see what the impact looks like, because I do think it would be somewhat significant on some of these guys that came up like right here. Just that little pocket of really fairly similarly priced guys all across with shooting guard eligibility. $3,800 Cason Wallace is one of those. $4,900 DiVincenzo, who is definitely interesting. The minutes have ticked up. The performance has ticked up. We're up to 0.88 per minute. He's looking a lot better. It's not a great game against Boston. Low-end total, but they are all low-end totals today. And you could kind of see a trajectory where that game goes off a little bit with everybody. It's two very high-end teams going head-to-head. So you could see that floating the game environment a little bit more than it might be getting credit for through the numbers. But you don't necessarily want to chase that either. Both Ant and Devo are more important on DraftKings. Ant comes up on FanDuel, 14%, but we're pretty far sub-5 value score. 8,900 over there, shooting guard and small forward eligible. Out of the Portland side of things, Scoot, not that interesting on FanDuel for 5,800 point guard only. We only got him 3% of the time, but at 4,800 on DraftKings point guard only, 18% exposed. And again, another guy that probably will go up a little bit over here. He's at worst playable. 0.95 per minute is not bad. Played just 23-8 still with missing pieces in Portland in their last game. Average is right about the 26 I've got him projected for. I think we have fair expectation of that. You can get better than a point per minute out of him on the right night. Going up against a diminished Lakers team, I don't hate the spot, but he's mispriced for that on FanDuel. Dennis Schroeder is looking like a major piece on the FanDuel slate, and if we don't get Steph Curry in, that's a fire away. I mean, we're getting him 51% of the time and ahead of the field. That means the field's at pretty aggressive ownership on him already. I put him at 30 minutes. He's been a 0.91 per minute player over the course of the full season across Brooklyn and a couple games in Golden State now. He's just 5,000 on the DraftKings slate. He only came up 24% of the time over there. But that's another one that might, at 5.57, that might start challenging this now that this comes down somewhat. So we'll see what the impact of that looks like. But I would expect a little bit more Schroeder on DK. He is above our 5.5. We've just got a lot to work with there. And on FanDuel at 5.08, he's one of our best values at guard already. And again, if Steph doesn't play, probably picks up a couple of minutes. Certainly would pick up a little nudge in rate. So, one to watch at worst. And I think you want to have a pretty fair share of them already. Almost done on the DK sim, it looks like. And the FanDuel one didn't work. Why did that? Well, we'll get a new DK sim in there anyway. I'm not going to waste too much time trying to... I think my upload that I put in here got screwy. Let's see. Can I replace it? Sounds like the neighbors are playing floor hockey upstairs. FanDuel, 59.2, and Christie. Back to now it worked. All right. I think that'll go. So again, Harden, if he plays, 45% exposed. That's ahead of the field. He's just under our 5 value threshold on the FanDuel slate. Super playable, but I don't love throwing him at OKC. It's not by a long stretch of the imagination the best game environment. He's questionable to play. It is the most boring city they've been. I mean, I've never been to Oklahoma City, but I've been to New Orleans. I've been to San Antonio, and those are two pretty fun towns. So maybe this is the night that James is just, coming into town, rolling in, a little bit hungover, plays, but doesn't really overperform. I don't know. I don't love the spot. 4.93 is easier to get away from on DraftKings. 10% below the field. I think having him is fine. And again, I do think it's a terrific per minute guy, 1.25. I'm not saying you don't play him. The sim obviously supports playing him. I'm just saying maybe I'm 35, not 45. Ahead of the field, but only by a little bit. I don't know that I love the huge position on James against OKC here. That said, if he comes up light as the slate changes around him, like right now on FanDuel, that's definitely come down since this sim ran. He's looking better given how low. He's in single-digit territory on FanDuel now. So, for one, that's an aggressively strong position against that low-end field ownership, which is the kind of thing you'd be looking for. You want to have a standout position when you're taking a position on a play like that. But it also does mean that you could bring it back to like 35 and still be 5x the field or so, and be in a similarly strong position and have some shares to spread around. So I think that's reasonable. And it might come up that way in a resim. We'll see. Nembhard, mix and match piece, 19.9% on DraftKings. Under the field on both sites. A lot of these guys in this range are just going to get chewed up by those value shares. Essentially, everybody here is, at worst, playable. We're talking about a group of players. Everybody's over 30 minutes. This is essentially starters. Nembhard, Simon, Sharp, Maxey, Dort, SGA, Tyler Hero. Obviously, some varying quality in there. Out of everybody in that group, the most playable guy and the guy you can get to in every single lineup anytime you play is SGA, just given his ridiculous points per minute upside. But at the price, 11.2 on FanDuel, not really coming up that much positionally. 7.3% exposed, a little bit below the field. 10.9K on DraftKings, same deal. 6% below the field. Get him, but probably come up a little bit as an undercut. That is a position against the field. I think it makes sense, and we've already got superstars that we're paying up for in other spots. But as far as slate breakers go, he is one of the top-end performers in a per-minute sense on the entire slate. You guys know that already. Tyrese Maxey continues to be interesting. If anytime Paul George is going to be interesting, Tyrese Maxey is going to be probably more interesting, just given the talent level. 1.17 per minute. He comes up 8% of the time because he's 8,800. He's point guard only on DraftKings. We did get him 20% of the time, but that's below the field for a 4.8 and change value score on FanDuel for 8,600. Another point guard only spot. But in a points per minute sense, in a they're already missing pieces sense, and might play without Joel Embiid again today sense, everything works in Maxey's benefit. This is the worst that Maxey's going to look today, and could end up looking quite a bit better than this and becoming not necessarily the absolute smash priority play of the day, but definitely one of your better high-end pricey plays of the day. Simons and Sharp both will benefit somewhat from missing bodies, but they're also just usually in their usual complement of minutes. So it's just a little bit of shuffle around rate. Neither one comes up as a critical piece. Around 8-10% on both guys and below the field on DraftKings. Lighter than that on Simons, who's a $7,000 option on FanDuel at both guard spots. He's the best per minute performer in that group, 0.92 per minute. I don't know if we need to be paying $7,000 for that, so I'm kind of glad he came up light. Let the field have him on FanDuel. Better plays on DraftKings where they're a little bit relatively cheaper. Lou Dort, super secure minutes, but not the best rate. Low usage player overall, 0.77 per minute on 13% usage this year. He's a very interesting NBA player, but he's not that interesting of a DFS player outside of a spot filler. 8% undercut to the field on DraftKings, 4.5% undercut to the field on FanDuel. You can take more than that, though. He is a movable part, especially at $4,200 on DraftKings. He's not at all expensive. Easily within range of being able to pay that off. He's pushing our value threshold at 5.2 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's just a 4.4. So it's a very different play, despite him coming up similarly across sites. And that's another one that with this coming down, especially given 41 and 42, they're very close together, we might see Lou Dort level back off with the field a little bit on DraftKings in the resim. And actually, I've got that right here. Let's see if it mattered. There you go. Christie down to 53. See? And that 3 points has a big impact. Oh, wait. I shouldn't do it there. I'm much more comfortable with that number. And it would be the same on FanDuel. We'll see if the FanDuel sim ends up running here. With my clunky upload, but oh, it did. Sweet. Ran fast, too. acemind.io for all your sim needs and your optimization needs. Anytime I say, let's see if this ran, it's because my uploads, the mistakes are almost always in my uploads. Anytime there's a technical issue, like yesterday when I was ran into an upload thing, and I pinged Blaine on the show. He was on it like he had replied, had options. These guys are all over it. It's a great site. All right, so a little bit different. 46%. That cut our ownership in Max Christie in half, and we're basically with the field on him now. That makes a lot more sense to me. I think we're in a much better place on Max Christie. And let's see. The D-Lo ownership on DraftKings went away in that resim. That's interesting. I wonder why that happened. I should have put all the positions back on. It's going to take a second now. Now we have a ton of Harden on DraftKings. Nope. Ignore that. Ignore the DK one. My DK tab had reloaded to FanDuel, so that is a FanDuel sim. That's why we're getting all that Harden and in that DK. So we're going to have to run it yet again. Let me unwind both of those. Apologies, guys. Oh, come on. This is what I get from messing with things during the show. The FanDuel rerun here is the most recent. Oh, you know what? I can just pull the... I'm going to go back to the previous version of our... I didn't realize that it flipped over to FanDuel on that tab. It only lets you sim one side at a time, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. But in that case, it tripped me up. All right, so this is back to our original DK sim, and I will get a rerun going here real quick. Doesn't take long now that I know what I have to change. One there. Yeah. $5:30. If you enjoy watching people change things in the background that you can't see and work on an Excel sheet that you can't see, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. You get that every now and then around here. And we got to lower them to get the changed sim that we want. Okay. All right, now we're really working in a funky place. The DraftKings sim is on the original numbers, I think. Yeah, 74, 72. Yeah. The FanDuel one is on the rerun. So you can see Christie already came down. 46% there. Getting still a ton of Austin Reeves. The Paul George share is still there. Schroeder went up from where he had been. Harden went up a little bit, I think, from where he had been. Still both looking very strong on FanDuel. Tyler Hero coming up. He's a differentiated piece across sites and probably will stay one. He was only coming up 6% of the time and well below the field for 8,600 at both guard spots on DraftKings. 23% though on FanDuel. As usual, with the Heat, I'm typically getting there when one of the main guys is out, but I never mind getting shares of Hero. He's a very solid mid-range 1.10 per minute FanDuel, 1.17 per minute guard on DraftKings. I like him better for the cheaper price on FanDuel. Once we start getting beyond like 8.5, I think it puts him into a threshold, into a tier that he might not be appropriate for. I like him in the 75 to 85 range. So we're still there on FanDuel. But a 4.84 value score versus a 4.89, technically that's slightly better on DraftKings because he's a better per minute performer over there. SGA, it looks like we got a couple few shares more there in the resim. I think that was a little lower, but again, not overly relevant on either site outside of just being a point per minute monster who could break the slate in half if he wanted to. Mix and match shares of Mike Conley, Tamani Kamara, Steph Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, Terry Rozier coming up level with the field on FanDuel at 7%, a little bit below on DraftKings at 2%. Just onesie, twosie shares of everybody, but we do get to a few shares of basically everybody going down the guard board, at least out of the relevant 25 to 35 minute projection guys. We're getting a nice little spread, despite the fact that it consolidated so quickly. Or that it was consolidated so much and it thinned out so quickly, it does spread actually to a pretty broad number of guys. We'll see if that holds up. Resim is done. Just need to tabulate the results. Brown and Porzingis out. Fantastic. I didn't see that till I ran it. That would have taken too long to reset anyway. That's going to shoot Tatum up through the roof. It's going to shoot a number of other Celtics up through the roof. We might as well be talking about next Tuesday's slate at this point. That's fun. That's where we were. We are now going to get a much more highly projected Jason Tatum. A pretty significant bump on Pritchard. He'll go to 32-ish minutes, presumably, and see a rate uptick for sure beyond where he was. And we'll get to shares of him, I'm sure. 6,000, though, 6,100. I'm not sure that he becomes the rocket to the moon, given all the other guard owner value. But I would expect that we'll get to reasonable shares of him. Drew and White will go up. I'll have to check what the rates look like. I think White gets more of it if memory serves. And he's the better per minute guy anyway. I think he goes up above 1-1. And Drew stays in the, like, he gains a half a point or something, like a 0.05 rather. Bump to Horford for a couple more minutes. And then Hauser, Cornette, downstream, trickle down minutes. And then like Keta will pick up a couple, assuming he's healthy. I don't even remember. But definitely major impact to the slate with that news. And that's not going to be accounted for as we talk through the rest of this one. So that's fun. Let's see if, all right, Sim finished. Let's at least see where we're at with the previously known knowns. But definitely not going to try and change that in the background here and resim for that. There you go. That's a significant downtick. 40%. That's still above the field. The field was in the 30% range, I believe. But that is now course corrected on that Christie share. We see a huge share of Austin Reeves. Still a very significant share of TJD. Denny pulling a ton of weight at 62%. We haven't talked about forwards yet, but there's Denny. Excuse me. There's Denny. There's LeBron. Paul George, we had talked about, still pulling a ton of weight on FanDuel and on DraftKings, and we're above the field now on DK. We were mostly done with guards, but let's take a quick look at what that impact is. So down the board here, minimal changes. A couple shares of Drew here, but those will go up. He's only 40. That's interesting. I didn't realize Drew Holiday was only 4,900 on DraftKings. Again, it's assuming that I'm correct, it's less of an impact overall, but I'm going to move him from 30 to probably 31, 32 minutes at least, and it'll pick up a little time-based uptick. And I think the rate goes up into the 0.89, 0.91 kind of territory. Pretty sure. So for your 49, I mean, you're already at a 5 value score. You were getting him 2% of the time. Let's assume he goes to like 26.5. You're very quickly approaching our value threshold there. That's a very cheap price for Drew Holiday. He's 57 on FanDuel. It's a totally different thing. We did get 12% at Dunk Robinson on FanDuel and did not get any of them on DraftKings. Connect 4% of the time on FanDuel, none of them on DraftKings is kind of interesting. Projected at 22 minutes. That's what he played the last time out. That's what he averages, but obviously there's some holes there, so we could stumble into a couple more minutes, but unless you see the projection change, I don't see there's any real reason to chase him. Derek White's going to definitely go up from this 1% for 71. He's also 71 on DraftKings. At least they've got him appropriately priced. A little 8% at TJ McConnell is like a mix and match guy. At 4,800, TJ just ends up getting into lineups on his very good per minute performance. But I could kind of forgo this as well, given all the options up here. And then it's interesting. We actually had, I think, downward impact on several of these guys from this little group of, what we're identifying as playable mid-range to upper value guys. A couple of those guys went downward. I think Nemhard came down from like 8 to 6. Sharp, I think, came down from like 8 to 6 and a little bit more of an undercut to the field. I could be wrong. Just going by what we were looking at before. But some interesting impact there, but obviously this is noteworthy. Came down significantly, but we're still, 5-8 value score. 40% exposed. Let's get out of guards. We'll talk forwards for a bit. Again, radically different slate already. Primed to change multiple more times as we go. 5:41. We do have a 7:30 start tonight. We got plenty of time to get through the rest of this, figure out the changes, reproject it, and then erase all of that and redo it again like 6 times. Danny Avdija played 32-9 the other day, put up just a 21.4 FanDuel score. That is disappointing. He's a 1+ player most of the time. 1.02 per minute so far this season. 1.02 last year, 1.03 this year on slightly increased usage overall. Just realized I had the last 3 there again. Again, those last 3 columns were not updated anytime in the last year or so because they're not usually there. That's why the screen was looking funky. So just on the assumption of minutes and the assumption of a normalization of performance back to he doesn't even have to be 1+, but back to the 0.9s at least for Denny. He's at least a good mid-range option, and he's looking like a strong mid-range option. 65% exposed ahead of the field for a 5.26 value score on FanDuel, ahead of our value threshold on both sides. 5.88 on DraftKings is ahead of the 5.5. 5,700 at both forward spots. He's nice and cheap. A lot of flexibility. 62% exposed and ahead of the field. I love the option. I really think that's a strong play. He's a stat filler. Double digits across the board, 58.4% true shooting, 17.7% assist rate, a 10.4% rebounding rate. That's what adds up to being a solid 1+ per minute reliable fantasy guy in most cases. LeBron with no AD is just a natural fit. He's in 47% of our top 150 on DraftKings and essentially level with the field. On FanDuel, 62% and technically slightly below the field. I think they were right around that number. All the LeBron you can carry is perfectly fine here. He's not appropriately priced for what his rate should be in this situation. That said, we are, by and large, dealing with an older version of LeBron. The wear and tear, it's not like he's bad, but the wear and tear is showing a little bit this year. 138 on DraftKings, though, still desirable. 133 on FanDuel, same deal. As far as guys anywhere near that territory, in a per minute sense. Oh, wait, I can't just say 1.2. I could sort it, but then that'll be a pain in the ass. Let's just do it by eye. So we've got 1.3 on LeBron, 1.38 on DraftKings. Obviously, Giannis is there. 1.68, but Giannis costs 11.4 and 11.7. Obviously, Tatum is there. Tatum's at 1.39. That's not a gigantic leap from the 1.33 that LeBron's putting up. Tatum costs 10.3 versus LeBron's 9.6. Tatum's going to gain significant ground now, though, that Porzingis and Brown are both out. That rate, I'm sure, becomes something like 1.5. 1.44 already on DraftKings. I think that elevates into the upper 1.5s. So he's a little bit more offset, but the point still stands that LeBron, as compared to everyone else, he's well ahead of every other player that's not named Giannis or Jason Tatum at the position in a per minute sense. And he's going to benefit from having no AD there. So his number is higher than what we're seeing on the screen overall. I don't remember off the top of my head what it is. But I had it here. It's 152. So again, that's this year in 342 minutes, a not insignificant sample, 726 possessions. Technically, that's with D'Lo there, though. When I did the projections, I did take D'Lo out. Let me take him out. In 140 minutes, 285 possessions without both AD and D'Lo there. It's 1.41. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But again, point stands. At 96, at 99, that's the best buy among the extreme high-end per-minute guys eligible at forward on either side. So it's totally justified getting major shares of LeBron. Paul George at 73. I talked about him for guards, but again, 1.08. There's security of upside there. I mean, even if he just comes in and gives you that 108, 109, you're talking about a 5+ value on FanDuel, a 5.4 value on DraftKings with ceiling for more on the right night. Golden State, solid defensive team, but nothing that Paul George can't handle in this spot, so I'm not going to ding him for that. It's not a great game environment, but none of them are. I can see Paul George coming through tonight, and again, if Embiid doesn't go, there's just a void of shots and a void of upside that needs to be filled. So I think we get there. Kuminga in a 30-minute projection, looking pretty solid on DK, 30% exposed. It's a 1.11 per minute player on DK this year, 110 on FanDuel. We only get him 10% of the time on FanDuel because he's a $6,900 option. He does have the eligibility at small forward, which is nice, but that price is kind of elevated. He played nearly 32 minutes the other day, put up 39 FanDuel points. If you get anything close to that game, you're in business on DraftKings. On FanDuel, though, this performance against that price, it's not a standout. He averages 26 minutes a night, but we've seen an uptick lately. I would expect around the 30. But we were getting more of Trace Jackson Davis on the FanDuel slate. They're both coming up a ton on DraftKings. Nas in 25 minutes, not really relevant to FanDuel, but we all know he's got slate bending upside if he plays a couple more minutes or is just the whirling dervish that he usually is out there. On DraftKings, he's only 4,500. Power forward and center eligible. DraftKings is being really generous with some of these prices. We get him 26% of the time. That's level with the field. He's a 5.6 value scorer in an is who he is projection. There's a significant ceiling there per minute. So if I'm taking a position on Nas, not that I expect him to play beyond 25 minutes, but there are cases to be made that he does from time to time, 32-9 in his last game. There's significant trajectory upward for him from already 5.64 value score. So if I'm building a position on Nas, I'm definitely taking a few additional shares and trying to have a little bit stronger of a, go further up the hill and take the high ground against everybody else that's getting to Nas on Nas Reed Hill, and then you can shoot downward at them. Jaden McDaniels, by the same token, I can take some of those shares right out of Jaden McDaniels and put them into Nas. 18% exposed to him and below the field already for 41 at small forward. Just use the forward spot and I'll take 12% of McDaniels and I'll take my advantage on Nas. I think that makes sense. Look at the point per minute difference. Yeah, you're talking about a 5-minute projected minutes difference, but that can easily just come out in the wash. A couple rebounds for Nas. We're there. Julius Randle, I almost called him a twin. Got baseball on the mind. We're under 90 days to opening day. We're 39 days till pitchers and catchers. Can't wait. But he's a Timberwolf, not a twin. At 74 on FanDuel, not overly relevant. He's a mix and match player with a reasonable upside to upper 40s, 50 fantasy points, but not a ton beyond that this year. 110 on DraftKings. We got him 8% of the time. He's fine. He's a mid-range, fine is who he is kind of a play in a not great game environment. Rui just 14% on FanDuel, 10.6 on DraftKings. We're below the field on both sites. Rui's okay. He's definitely going to get plenty of run and plenty of opportunity here. Got him at 34 minutes. He's a $5,600 option with multi-forward eligibility on both sites. He's a 5.19 value for 53 on DraftKings, where he looks a little bit better. But we actually got more of him in the raw sense, but less than the field and further away from the field on FanDuel. Rui's a complex problem today. I don't see the need to take more than that. I think I'm comfy being that far below the field and still having, a fair share, 14, 15%, 10, 12% on DraftKings. The issue with Rui is just a 0.75 per minute guy, 0.74 on DraftKings. In this situation with no AD, no D-Lo over the course of this year in 100 minutes, 201 possessions, not the biggest sample in the world, but he's only gone to 0.78. It's not like he's shot into the stratosphere in the small sample. I'm fine being around this level on Rui. Giannis just kept coming down every resim. We had a significant share of Giannis earlier in the day, and it's kind of gone by the wayside. Should be able to just completely abuse Brooklyn all he wants. Could easily break the slate. 1.68 per minute on both sites this season. We got him 2% of the time on FanDuel, 4% of the time on DraftKings. If you can claw back more of Giannis, go ahead and do it. It's just now we've got LeBron looking so strong at, again, it's an offset price, but it's still a high price relative to everybody else. So difficult to combine those guys, but as much Giannis as you can carry alongside as much LeBron as you can carry. But LeBron is the higher priority between the two right now. And Tatum is going to surpass Giannis in that priority list as we rerun, reproject, resim. Doug likes Rui tonight, thinks he smashes. What draws you to Rui, Doug? Mike, I was willing to be there, but my concern was the lack of any uptick in the small sample. Let me go back to actually, let me do it two ways. In the no AD but leaving D-Lo out there because whatever, just to get a larger sample on it. It only goes up to 203 minutes. He does go to 0.85. So there's maybe a little more meat on the bone for that, but that's kind of fudging it with D-Lo in there. If I draw it back with both out, all right, if we go back to essentially a calendar year, to the beginning of last January, and AD, D-Lo both off the floor, but then I got to get like Russ's in here. You know what Wowie really needs is a active roster button, like on Fangraphs, where you can just click, show me these years, but for players who are only currently on the active roster. That would make Wowie so much easier to work with. All right, I could maybe justify some like a 0.85-ish for Rui, and I'll probably go lighter than that. I do have him at 0.81, by the way, for today, so we're already basically where I would have gone, though. I could give him, if I give him another, you could give him a point or 1.25 fantasy points and take him right to that 0.85. And that's a not insignificant sample. It's 700 and change minutes. It's 1,600 possessions going back to the beginning of last year. It is mixed, though, because Malik Beasley's still in here. Lonnie Walker's in here. Tristan Thompson's in here. So I'm not going to sit here and take all the time to take those guys out right now. I will do that before I reproject it. But you can give Rui a little bit more upside. That said, he's coming up nearly 40% owned, and we're getting a pretty strong indication under the field on both sites here. Wiggins looks like an Izzy is kind of a spot. 6,000 both forward spots on FanDuel. We got him 12% of the time, a little bit below the field. 5,600 on DraftKings, 9% of the time. Could be one of those guys, though, that falls off the board a little bit around some of the Celtics guys that are going to emerge. So just keep an eye on him, but I think he's imminently playable at worst. He's a point per minute guy on both sites. Absolutely fine. If Steph doesn't go, I believe he goes up slightly. Draymond definitely goes up if Draymond plays. Draymond goes up for his assist rate goes up in that situation. So there's a significant impact if Steph doesn't go. So keep an eye on Wiggins. I think he would only get a little bit better looking, but he's not going to travel far from this mid-range that we got him in and below the field. Lou Dort, mix and match piece, 6% is who he is. There's Draymond. Draymond is the same thing as Wiggins. There's only a little bit of upward trajectory for him. Call it trajectory toward 15, 18 at most on DraftKings. Probably already, only a couple few points, 18 max on FanDuel. I don't think we're getting all that much more. We go to well, I guess that would make him interesting. All right, if you see him get to 33.5 points, then consider him a stronger value. Put it that way. I'll have to see what it does. We'll have to get there first. That would happen if Steph came out, and I don't know that it would go that high. Yabusele with no Drummond. I did kind of on the fly reproject Philly here. I put him right back at the 30 minutes he played last night. He only put up a 16.7 on the FanDuel scale in that, but for the season he's been at 0.87 in his 24 minutes a night. 5.12 value score on FanDuel. He's a moderate piece, 13% level with the field. But again, we're going to have other guys filling those spots, probably at better values or at least a little bit less fragility. So I don't think he's mandatory, but I also think he's fine with a little bit of upside. On DraftKings, 6%, even though he's only 4,500 over there. It's a 5.5 value score. It's what we're looking for as far as value. There's just so much going to these guys that he just kind of got boxed out. But I think he is a reasonable value prop on the DraftKings slate considering how low that price is. And if no Embiid, by the way, just further and further up the board. Derek Jones, mix and match. Kamara, same deal. Caleb Martin looking like a piece again on FanDuel. 4.8 value score is not great, but we got him 22% of the time. Level with the field. Be curious to see if anybody from Boston might be able to replace that spot. Dorian Finney-Smith, same story, 20%. I'd be fine replacing shares of either of these guys. Neither is a standout value. Both are fine, but both are fairly low-end per minute performers. On DraftKings, you really don't have to worry about it. 46 and 42, they're just getting boxed out by better value options. I guess look at the difference. You can see it just in the shading from those top 15, 20 rows. Look how dark shaded that is green on DraftKings in our value numbers and how light it gets for value on FanDuel for the same guys. So that's what's giving these guys a little bit of equity in this group of lineups. That's why we're getting some of them. But it's also why I can see easily just kind of forgoing at least some of these shares. Like if I'm taking a position on Caleb Martin or Finney-Smith, I think I'm going under on either one or probably under on both. So give me 12, 15 and an undercut to the field where I can use some of that money to gain shares on some of the better options up in this territory. Or just positionally have more room for my LeBron shares, my Paul George shares, even though they're more expensive, different kind of plays. I'm fine leaving some of these on the table because I think it's just created by, obviously that's important, but it's created by a little bit of lack of value here from some similarly talented performers at a little bit higher prices, but better per minute types and probably better DFS plays. That's an interesting little wrinkle. That little pocket of ownership right there is really interesting on FanDuel. If they're super low owned by the field, and it doesn't look like they are because we're essentially level, but if they went down in the field, I think I might reverse that position somewhat, as much as I don't want to be saying that. Like if you saw them drop into the upper single digits or like 10, 12% range instead of on the threshold of 20s or into the 20s, then they become more interesting because they would have this same value in the slate and you'd be ahead of the field. You'd be taking a position on them ahead and somewhat advantageous on what are two perfectly fine value plays. So that one almost entirely depends on where the field goes. But given that the field's in this range right now, I'd rather be below. If the field goes down, I'll go maybe not up, but I'll maintain, if that makes sense. Again, Tatum's going to go to the moon, so keep an eye on that. That obviously has a major impact on everybody we've already talked about. Mix and match shares on Mathurin, Connect. Kill Alexander Walker, not really a relevant piece. Actually, 0 shares of him on both sites. Norm Powell, I'm kind of disappointed. We didn't get a ton of Norm. I got Norm at 35 minutes. He's a 1.03 per minute player this season. Am I under? Oh, that's right. This is the OKC game. That's why I'm under. You could argue a little bit more for Powell. Again, he's been a slightly above 1 per minute player, and I've got him a little under that. 35 minutes, only 32 and change FanDuel points, 33 and change DraftKings points. You can give him a point and a half on either side if you want to get to a little bit more, and he has been good. He has justified it. It's just that buzzsaw of OKC is never one that's great to throw players into just for the hell of it, and I'm trusting the model and the impact that they're having on him. Pascal Siakam, mix and match play on both, but a perfectly capable 1+ per minute guy on both sites. Ben Mathurin, 0.85 per minute, 0.88 DraftKings, mix and match shares on both. Jimmy, didn't really get him on FanDuel. Didn't really get him on DK. 85, 88,000 is who he is game for Jimmy Butler, which means could go out and kind of bend the slate to his will. But right now, a 4.1 value score on FanDuel, a 3.9 on DraftKings, really not looking like much of a piece. Middleton looks better on FanDuel at 6%, but not critical. Not at all important on DraftKings. Nobody else really lining up. Who's that? Ricky Council. Who cares? Let's get to centers, and we will punch out of here so that I can get things updated. 6 o'clock. Hit the like if you haven't already. It does help. Subscribe if you haven't already. Picked up a couple subscribers in the last couple of days. Appreciate y'all. Ooh, did I just say y'all? I don't think I've ever said that in my life. I appreciate those of you who have subscribed to my channel. Appreciate y'all. However you want it said, I do appreciate you guys. Monster shares of Trace Jackson Davis. 77% on FanDuel, 67%. Nothing's changed about that one. Went out, played 28 minutes last time out, put up a 42.2. He's been a 1.17 per minute player. Just super interesting right now. The price hasn't really adjusted on DraftKings. It's come up somewhat on FanDuel, but I don't think it's high enough yet. 5.49 monster value number on the FanDuel slate. I will point out that we have 72% of Nick Claxton on FanDuel at a 5.5 value score. So we're getting basically all that TJD at power forward and a lot of Nicky Claxton at center. Glad I noticed that. That's a radically different play across sites. Holy hell. 5,700 on FanDuel for the 1.03 per minute guy with a lot of big bodies missing for Brooklyn. A lot of bodies in general missing for Brooklyn. I don't love the matchup for him, but I think I'm fine with it. I don't know that we need to be at 72, but there's also not like a ton of center-only centers that we really have to worry about. We're getting a little bit of Bam. That's fine. He did have a 50-point game last night in 31 minutes. Zubac, we've got a few shares, but whatever. Dayron would be interesting if things change in this game. If there's no Clowney, he picks up a little bit more run, and he's 45 versus Claxton's 57. So that could get a little interesting. Docking, I appreciate you, buddy. Mama says, Power, stop that Embiid running. He's just lazy. Easily the best center in the league. Not even close. Second best. There's a guy who does play quite a bit at Mile High City who's quite a bit better. And at a certain point, like, you do have to be able to play, right? Talent takes you very, very far. But part of that is just being on the court. You have all the talent in the world. If you're not able to play, it doesn't really matter. So let's see. The Dayron one is probably the most likely to have an impact on that Claxton share, just because of how cheap he is. And he is a very good per minute guy when he gets a little opportunity. And I don't really mind leaving a little bit of not overly valuable Ayton on the board. Embiid obviously is capable of bending the slate if he's out there at all. We got a ton of Embiid on DraftKings. He's 10-5 on FanDuel. I don't know that I directly want to say, like, I'm fine getting a lot more Nick Claxton than Joel Embiid, but for this kind of a spread in price, he's essentially half the price. So, yeah, I think it masks out. I think it makes sense. That is not at all the case on DraftKings. We literally did not get Nick Claxton on DraftKings. We got 1 in 4 lineups have Joel Embiid on DraftKings because he's only 9,400 over there. Even in the downturn and in the 11 games he's played this season, the 29 minutes a night, he's still putting up 1.40 on DraftKings, and we've seen him slightly improve in his last couple times he's managed to take the court. I've got him in the, I believe, 1.5 territory. Yeah, 1.54 for tonight. And we're talking about a guy who last year on a FanDuel scale played at 1.82. He's a 1.37 on FanDuel this year, to put that in perspective. So absolutely you can play plenty of Joel Embiid. You should play a lot of Joel Embiid, if not more than that, on DraftKings. If I'm building a position on DK, given where that price point is, I would go up from there and take an advantage against the field rather than pulling it down. And I think you'll have plenty of room to do that with. That said, again, keep in mind, we're going to be getting more Tatum now, and he's a high price that's going to box out some of those Embiid shares. So there's an interesting shuffle in play here from where we're at right now, because like this guy's not on the board anymore. Jaylen Brown's not on the board anymore. Tatum's going to rocket up the board for some of those forward shares. It's a completely different slate than what we're looking at. Nas, we've talked about. Again, Bam, more interesting on DraftKings. We got him 10% of the time. He's a 5.07 value there. Actually, technically a better value score. We're above the FanDuel value threshold for our 84. So we'd rather have this than that. The question becomes how much of this would I potentially want to try and pivot into what is a reasonably priced Bam now that I'm actually considering it. 5+ on the value scale. Our other FanDuel value guys that are 5+ have power forward eligibility or are power forwards. Or they're Nick Claxton. So that's probably the alternative. Go up to Bam, play Claxton. These guys go at power forward and then just odds and end shares of everybody else that's center eligible. Fairly straightforward. Finney Smith is power forward, small forward on FanDuel. You don't have to worry about it, but you take 20%. That's fine. On DraftKings, with his center eligibility, he didn't get to anything. 4,200. That's surprising. That speaks to the positional difference. I would expect that means a lot of those are falling at small forward, oddly. Power forward and center, we really didn't get any, even though he's less expensive on DraftKings and a better value mark, 498 versus 477. Again, Giannis kind of fell by the wayside and will continue to do so with more emerging value from the Tatums of the world. But you can always get Giannis, and you always should. If you can carry more, carry more. Zubac, mix and match 5%-ish on both sides below the field, and fine with that, but he is a good per minute guy, 115, 114 across sites. Reliability of 30-plus minutes. It's just another guy that from the Clips that I don't see the need to throw him in a bad game environment into the bad side of that going up against OKC. So I'm happy to kind of leave him on the table here. Draymond, as mentioned, goes up if Steph doesn't play. He's fine right now, 12%, 6%, mix and match. Anybody I haven't really touched on yet? Hartenstein looks like an is who he is kind of a spot, but always an interesting guy, 1.25, 1.24 per minute. Technically, for that rate, he is still at a good price, 7,600 on both sites. It's just a 4.65 value score, 4.79, so I guess maybe not technically. Actually, that's more a product of the minutes. Now I'm thinking it through. 30 minutes. If he was a 34-minute play, we'd be talking about a significant value given the price against the rate. Just a little bit capped by that minutes projection. But a very good player. Big fan of Hartenstein. Wish he was still a Knick. Rudy Gobert, no use for him on FanDuel. 4% on DraftKings. I never really need shares of Rudy Gobert. The ultimate collector of fantasy points. Miles Turner, 4% on FanDuel, under the field, 2% under the field on DraftKings. A solid 1+ per minute guy who plays 30 minutes a night pretty reliably. But that doesn't get us to a 5 on FanDuel. It doesn't get us near a 5.5 on DraftKings. Meh, I think is the word. I think I skipped over DeAndre Ayton, but very different piece from site to site. He's 1,000 more expensive on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. We got him a couple times on FanDuel, but below the field and not a very relevant piece over there for a 4.89 value. He's above our value threshold pretty significantly at 5.65 on DraftKings. We got him 38% of the time over there for the 6,300. Looking like a great play. I think you can pair him nicely with Trace Jackson-Davis. You've got power forward eligibility on a number of these other guys, on several of these other guys that are coming up significantly. A lot of room for Ayton on the DraftKings slate. I think we've got both Klingon and Time Lord are completely off the injury report for this one. All the bigs suddenly healthy. But shouldn't really matter. Shouldn't really impact Ayton. Played 30 minutes. You could maybe take a minute away from him. But looking like a significant play across sites. Wow. Ivy's out for the season. I saw it was a break. Broken fibula. Oof. That sucks. That is painful. Not that I've experienced it, but I mean from everything I've heard. Never want to experience it. I know that much. All right, guys. With that in mind, 6:15, 7:30 start time. So we're coming up on our usual hour and change to get things done and keep things updated and everything. Let me see what else has changed around us. We got any new news in the last little bit? Friday. KP, Jalen. All right. Everything else is Friday. So let me get that Celtics stuff updated. Maybe we'll have a gradual ease into the slate with that news. What do we have? We've got 2 at 7:30, Indy, Miami, Boston, Minnesota at 7:30. Then we've got Brooklyn, Milwaukee at 8, the Clips and OKC at 8. And then we got 2 hours till Philly, Golden State, and then Portland, LA rounding things out at 10:30. It's going to be a long night. I'll have dinner between the 8 o'clock and the 10 o'clock games. By the way, if you ever see like there's a, oh my God, it's 8:15 and somebody from the 10 o'clock game got ruled out and Terry hasn't updated things in the last 10 minutes, give me a sec. I'm probably walking the dog or eating dinner. Not that you guys complain about those things. You guys absolutely rock out there. One more time, hit the like button if you're new here. I know we had a bunch of people watching earlier. I think a bunch of have scattered to the wind by now. But if you're new, rotoscouts.com is the site. I got to learn to plug these things more when people are actually here listening. But everything's under $1 a day at Rotoscouts. My goal is to keep things super affordable so that you guys put your money into your bankroll and build your bankrolls up. Maybe somewhere down the line, years from now, when things are crazy and we've got a bunch of employees, maybe then the prices go up and you guys will already be secure in your bankrolls and happy to pay more. But we won't have to get to that point for a long, long time. Goal is to keep things nice and affordable, set out a little bit different than a lot of the other sites that are geared around the people with thousands and thousands of dollars to spend on DFS every night. That's not who most of the community is. 80-85% of people out there are building a handful of lineups for a few bucks a day and not looking to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a per sport basis on their projections and their data. $1 a day gets you access to NBA, NHL, and NFL. We are less than 90 days away from opening day of baseball. That's included as well. So check it out at RotoScouts. Check out acemind.io as well, our sim partners. Promo code RotoScouts gets you 20% off their great tools and products. Strongly encourage you to check them out. They're building more and more every day and just getting better and better over there. And they've got the most competitive pricing in the industry for those kind of tools. So pretty dynamite combination between the two, if you ask me. It's been successful for me. Hopefully it will be for you too. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Come on back tomorrow for more. We'll see you, gang. I should have wound this down with the tab actually open so that I could click on it. We'll see you, gang.